from only being able to jump on the right side of the court to getting banned for wearing shirts. These are NBA rules you didn't know existed. Let's talk about no logos except for shoes. The NBA recently changed its policy on logos to allow advertisers to place logos on players' jerseys. Players, however, are not permitted to promote a brand or logo on any part of their clothing, including, as in Iman Shumpert's case in 2013, their hair. Shumpert attempted to sport the Adidas logo shaved into his head, but was informed by the NBA that it had to be removed. Shumpert posted a picture the following day with the logo entirely removed, leaving a massive triangle of baldness in place of the logo. Shumpert was let go by the brand a few years later. Now let's talk about the no punches rule. Now, I know you must be thinking, obviously the players can't punch other players. But when we're talking about this rule, think more of punching a ball instead of an actual player. Although that too is prohibited, as hitting a ball with a closed fist is illegal, and will result in a turnover as the NBA takes spectator safety very seriously and considers it to be their highest priority. This rule is kind of a big thing due to how unpredictable the direction of the ball hit is, which leaves possibilities for many injuries to happen to fans if this rule wasn't set in place. It would ultimately make the game more violent. What would you do if a ball was flying in your direction? That's kinda weird, right? But in a minute, there's one rule that not even NBA players know about. The next rule is a very weird rule that not a lot of people know about. Anti-LeBron shirts. This rule was created due to angry fans and a very tense season because LeBron James departed from Cleveland and went to play for the Miami Heat. This caused a lot of fans to go in a rage of fury. Their rage was so immense that in preparation for a Miami Heat game, people started to make anti-LeBron James shirts and signs and have them displayed during said game. While the shirts and signs were banned, some sneaky people managed to get through security and wave their signs of the game to show their anger. Next up is the 10-second violation. This rule was created particularly to reduce the amount of time a player can spend getting ready and shooting free throws. A player has 10 seconds to take their shot. I'm assuming that many viewers of this video are thinking, wow, I'm sure some players have a hard time with this rule, right? But surprisingly, few people actually break it. Instead, they just struggle and have close calls. Dwight Howard is a player who struggles the most with this rule, as he has had trouble with this aspect of the game throughout his whole career, despite the extra time he has dedicated to throwing. Next up, we have slam dunks. I know what you're thinking. Slam dunks are completely normal, right? But occasionally, players who are just too big and strong will cause delays or even the cancellation of the match. Players like Daryl Dawkins and Shaquille O'Neal became notorious for breaking the glass backboards when they dunked. Due to improvements in the strength of the rim, the new rules are that if a player dunks so hard that they shatter the backboard, the point is not made. Historically, shattering a backboard meant the player in question was ejected from the court due to the safety risks it poses to other players and spectators. The recent rule, however, states that if a player dunks so hard that they shatter the backboard, the point is simply not counted and the player in question receives a technical foul. You may or may not be fined for unsportsmanlike behavior, but that may be a small price to pay to make everyone too afraid to try and block you. This next one is a rule you probably never have heard of because of how rare it is: the off-the-bounce shot. The NBA has a rule in the books that states that if a player shoots a shot that ends up bouncing in the hoop, it's considered legal as long as the ball bounces before the shot clock expires. But if the ball is shot and a buzzer goes off, and then the ball bounces and goes in, it's considered a dead ball and would be disallowed. This is another ridiculous rule that hasn't necessarily happened before. And if someone were to pull this off, it might rank among the best shots ever, provided they do it before the timer runs out. Jump balls have always been a part of basketball, but there's some very specific rules that you have to follow or the game will restart. The main rule that I'm talking about is only being able to jump on the right side of the jump ball. This rule is fairly straightforward and simple, but the fact that it had to be created makes it seem a little odd. Basically, it states that all players must be on the right side of the court, or facing the basket into which they will be shooting, within 24 seconds of the game starting. If the referee notices that any players or all of them are not lined up correctly, they must all stop what they're doing, return to their lines, and rearrange themselves into the proper position. The game restarts after they are properly lined up. However, if the referee does not catch the player's mistake within 24 seconds, the game will continue and no restart is required. But this next one is a rule you probably never heard of because of how rare it is. The disaster draft. This rule here is certainly a tragic one, since it was built to continue a season. If anything happens to take place in an odd way, it states that if at least 5 members of an NBA team die or are dismembered in an accident, an emergency draft will come into effect to help the affected team, allowing them to pick one player from any other league as a way to rebuild what was lost. There's a saying that goes, "The show must go on." And I think with this rule, that would be an accurate way to describe the situation. But the fact that this rule was ever created to begin with is insane, don't you think? Let's hope this rule is never needed. Coming up, we have resting players. The NBA's recent actions have gone against their beliefs in protecting players' health though, as Adam Silver is attempting to crack down on teams resting star players during nationally televised games. This rule is in place to make sure the NBA's players have 18 days of mandatory rest, and it basically is a limit on the amount of practices that NBA teams can have over the course of the season. Players recovering from injuries will have plenty of time to rest, recover, and return to their previous levels of performance. But what makes it weird is that Doc Rivers and the Los Angeles Clippers were punished for resting Kawhi Leonard without having an injury. Now let's talk about the National Anthem Rule. The National Anthem in a timely manner. With the exception of a few voices of protest, it hasn't really caused any problems, and everyone seems to be fairly understanding of it. There is no specific punishment for those who refuse to stand, but it is said that the players who choose to do so will be dealt with on a case-by-case basis to explain why this rule is important and necessary. This rule has always been a league requirement, and will remain so for as long as the requirement is upheld. Now those were some weird rules, but you know what else is weird? You, if you don't watch this next video.